Hey everyone, my name is Bridget and welcome to my channel. Today's video is going to be a story time on my leopard gecko Twigs. As I mentioned in my other videos, I do want to do a couple of more serious videos just to kind of share the history of my animals and anything that has happened to them in the past, how they lived up to this point, and how they're doing now. So today I want to focus on Twigs because I do have a little bit of an interesting story for him, and I do have a little bit of a PSA to share in there at the end. So to get started on this video, I'm going to kind of backtrack a little bit and share kind of how all of this process went. So taking it back to about July of 2017, I started contemplating wanting a leopard gecko. I'd wanted a gecko for quite some time, but I didn't know exactly what type of gecko I wanted to get. So I started kind of looking around and doing some research on different ones and their care requirements, and I just came to the conclusion that I really wanted a leopard gecko. I've always loved leopard geckos. I think their faces and how they look like they're grinning all the time is the most precious thing on earth. So I definitely knew that I wanted to get one for myself. So I talked to my husband and we decided that that would be a good idea to get a leopard gecko. And so right around July, the beginning of August, I started to look around at different breeders and everything and see where I could get one. I was also thinking of going to expos and things like that. Just kind of put my foot in the water and I started to buy the things that I needed for the gecko. So I got the tank, all the decorations, the water bowl, supplements, and all that kind of stuff. So by the time we actually got Twigs, I had everything set up. I had all the temperatures going and everything that was possibly needed for him in his home, because I don't like to get an animal and not be prepared for it. So everything was going very well, and here we get to August of 2017, and I'm looking on a breeder's website and I found that they were doing a special for leopard geckos at 30% off. And one of the other things that I knew that I wanted to do is I didn't want to get a baby leopard gecko. I actually wanted to get an adult. Most of the animals that I've had have started as babies, and so I thought it would be an interesting contrast to go ahead and get an adult that's already established. So I found that in this special of 30% off, they had tons of adults. And I'm assuming because of the type of breeder that it is, they have so many animals in their facility that they just need to make room all the time. So they grabbed a bunch of those adults, put them on the site, and we're trying to get those sold. And then there's little old me who fell in love with literally all of them, but I knew I had to decide on just one. So I was looking around, looking at their prices, and I knew that I kind of wanted more of a normal range, because when it comes to reptiles and this kind of business, I guess you could say, there are more designer types, and it's not necessarily about the animal anymore. It's more on how fancy you can get. And I know that with Phoebe, she's considered a fancy morph. In that time of my life, I just wanted a bearded dragon, and I found a really good breeder who had beautiful bearded dragons. As soon as I saw her, I fell in love with her. So it wasn't a situation where I was like, I don't want the normal one, I want this fancy one. So when it comes to these leopard geckos, I thought, well, since I have more of a fancy designer morph in the bearded dragon, I thought I would just go the normal route with a leopard gecko. So as I was looking on the site, I saw that they had one male leopard gecko adult left, and he was very inexpensive. So I thought, well, that's one that I want. And then this is where it gets interesting. Lo and behold, as soon as I start looking for these leopard geckos and getting prepared to actually buy one, there was a big old hurricane that was coming our way. As some of you may know, I do live in South Texas, and so of course that Gulf of Mexico is right around the corner, and Hurricane Harvey decided to come up around that time and just make a show of himself. So it was August 22nd of 2017 when we got the news that Hurricane Harvey was on the way, and of course I'm already bummed out at the fact that we've got a hurricane coming, but I was also bummed at the fact that this leopard gecko situation was not going to happen for me. So I contemplated what to do, and I thought, well, I really want this leopard gecko. I don't want this to pass me by. So I emailed the company and asked them if I could just pay for it and that they would hold it for me until this hurricane madness just swept away. So I ended up emailing the company about the normal leopard gecko, and sadly, I'm not really sure why, but I never got a reply on that one. And the very next day, that leopard gecko was sold. So I was pretty upset, and I was almost gonna give up on the idea, but I decided to just keep looking, see what else I could find, and then I came upon Twigs, the little dark max snow, which is pretty close to a normal anyways. And so I was like, well, I think he's the one. I'm gonna go ahead and email about this. And I didn't trust that I would get an email back the second time, but thankfully, I think it was within an hour, I got a reply and they agreed to let me pay for him and hold him until all of the hurricane madness went away. So that is what I did. I went ahead and paid for Twigs. So excited, starting to just imagine his little face and everything and how he was gonna be. And it was so exciting, and that's kind of what got me through dealing with the hurricane, is just knowing that after it was all said and done, I would get my little baby. So then a few days later, on August 25th, the hurricane came and didn't turn out at all how we expected it to. It got very massive, very dangerous, and the waters were rising, rain was falling. It was just a bad situation. I'm sure all of you guys know about Hurricane Harvey and how that all went down. In my area, thankfully, we did not get as much damage as 90% of everyone. We were very fortunate. I don't know why we deserved to be so fortunate. It makes me feel so bad to think about how other people fared when we fared so well. So after all this hurricane madness happened, everything pretty much came to a halt. Airports were closed down, the mail was not running, people were losing their homes, there was so much flooding in Houston and the surrounding areas. I mean, the coastline was just absolutely destroyed. It was just something out of a horror story. So at that point, I had to email the company again and just tell them, you know, it's going to be a while before I'd actually get this gecko to me. Can you just please care for him? It may take a week or two. Just care for him. Let me know whenever your shipments become open again and when our shipments are open again, and then we can see then how this is all gonna play out. So things kind of calmed down a little bit. It was still pretty crazy around my area, but it wasn't bad. And at about 11 a.m. on Thursday, September 7th, I got a call from the company saying that their shipment was open to my area, and so they were gonna go ahead and ship my little gecko, and that I would have him the next morning by 10 a.m. So that day I was frantic. That's an understatement. I was so frantic. I was so excited, so nervous. I asked her, you know, how does the shipping overnight happen? I'd never had it done before in my life, so I didn't know what to expect. And she assured me that things would be fine, that they ship them overseas all the time for a few days at a time, and they all still wound up okay. So I got the reassurance that things were gonna be fine. So the next morning I had my mom over and I had my best friend Christy over, and I was just so beside myself. And I'm checking the tracking status on all of this, and nothing is showing me anything even remotely close to that gecko getting to me anytime soon. The tracking information was so vague. It didn't have any kind of details as to where exactly he was, any estimated delivery date, when he'd left this facility, when he left that facility. It was just vague. There was basically nothing there. I began to freak out, and I was beginning to think that this was just really gonna go south. So 10 a.m. Friday morning came and went. I did not have my gecko, and I ended up calling the company. I think it was afternoon, maybe 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And I told them, you know, I still don't have the gecko. I don't know what's going on. The tracking is not telling me anything. I have no idea where he is. I can't get in touch with anyone. I was sobbing at this point. So they told me that they were gonna call around and figure out what was going on and give me a call back. And that is exactly what they did. And when they did call me back, they found out that he was in fact stuck in Houston, and that I should get him the next day. Not at all what I wanted to hear. That entire night, I was just a hot mess and didn't know what to do with myself, just crying and crying, acting like a total lunatic. I'm a very sensitive person. And then the next morning came, and I pretty much expected everything to fail again, and I had my mom over to give me moral support at this point. Before, she was there to just kind of like see, she was excited, but the second day she was there to just keep me sane, you know? So on Saturday, September 9th at 10 a.m., I still did not have a gecko. So again, I was just tracking the package like a maniac, and finally it showed that he had left the shipping facility in Houston and was on his way to me. So I waited and waited, and it was about 12:15 in the afternoon that he finally arrived. Finally, it's so hard to even remember that moment because it was just like tunnel vision. As soon as I walked outside, I like darted to the guy in the truck. I was just like, gimme, gimme, gimme. I signed for him and everything, and I was like, thank you, and just immediately left and didn't even talk to him one more second. So we walked inside, my mom and I, and we opened the box. And I do have a little bit of footage of me opening the box that I will play right now. Oh my God, he's on his back. Oh my God. Hi. Hi, baby. Hi, baby. I'm so excited to have you. Oh, hi, darling.
Hi, Twigs.
Hi, Mr. Twigs. You are so cute. Hi. I know you've had a hard time. You've had a very hard time. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, how beautiful. Like I said, I'm a very sensitive person, pretty emotional, so that was emotional, I know. But the next thing that I do want to talk about is his size. And this is where it gets a little bit touchy, because the company that I got him from, I do love them so much, but I also think that they do have so many animals in their facility that it does make it difficult to really focus on each individual animal and how they are doing up to that point. So when I opened Twigs, as you can see in the video, which I'll also throw some photos up, he was extremely skinny. And we're talking about a leopard gecko that was already right at a year old. I mean, they should not weigh what he weighed at a year old, which I'll get into in just a second. So first, when I was looking at the website and looking at him, I did see this photo right here, and to me, it looks like a really small leopard gecko. Like, when I saw this photo, I thought, oh, well, that's just him, you know, being young. That must have been taken when he was a baby. But then upon opening him, I realized that that actually was a very accurate representation of what he looked like when I did get him. It kind of threw me off for a bit because I didn't expect him to be that size. I expected him to be more chunky, because when you do look online and you look at photos and everything, you do see leopard geckos as these like big chunky little things with these fat tails, you know, and that's not at all what mine looked like. So when I opened him, which I'll show some photos, some little screen clips of in the video so you can kind of get an idea. His little arms were so skinny. They looked like it was just skin and bones basically, and he didn't have any kind of definition or meat on his bones. I mean, he literally looked like a twig, right? Not why I named him Twigs, that's just such a coincidence. And then you look at his stomach, and it was just such a small stomach. Like, it was literally just the insides of his body. Like, there wasn't any type of, you know, girth or health to him. And then you look at his tail, which was the most alarming thing. Like, this was what I was the most concerned about. His tail didn't have any kind of chunkiness to it whatsoever. It wasn't like fat at all. It was just a skinny little tail. I mean, like this skinny. And I just wasn't used to seeing that. I was used to seeing all of these pictures that I was seeing of these fat leopard gecko tails, and so I immediately thought of sticktail, and that is a disease that leopard geckos get. It's like a bacteria that grows inside their body that prevents them from gaining weight. So no matter how much they eat or anything that they do, they just remain skinny, and their tails will just eventually become so skinny that it's just the bone that is inside of their tail. That is it. So immediately I was really freaking out, thinking that I had gotten this unhealthy leopard gecko and that something was wrong and that he wasn't gonna make it, he wasn't gonna gain weight. And we did weigh him that day, and he weighed 43 grams. Now 43 grams is not terrible, but it is more of a juvenile weight. For an adult, I would not trust anything less than 60 grams. I think that anything less than 60 grams is way too small. When we weighed him and found out that he was 43 grams, I thought, well, that makes sense. I mean, he's skinny, there's no meat on him. So after getting him settled and everything, it was about a maybe 4 to 5 days after we had him, I took him to the vet because I wanted to get him checked out and see how everything was going. He had some loose stoles, so I wanted to see if it was, you know, anything related to sticktail or if he had any other kind of parasites or anything in him. So we took him to the vet, and the vet looked him over and said that he looked okay. He definitely needed to put on some weight. The loose stools were just basically from stress. You know, he was in the mail for 2 days. So, but ever since then, we got him home, we got him eating, and that was 6 months ago. And today, he is very healthy, very chunked up. He now weighs 76 grams, or he weighed 76 grams when I weighed him on March the 10th. His next weigh date is coming up very quickly, so I expect him to be at least 80 at this point. As you can see here, he is so healthy. He has got meat on all of his limbs. His stomach is nice and chunky, and then his tail is my favorite part, because even though it's not as chunky as some leopard geckos that you would normally see, it is still so much more chunky than it was, and that just makes me such a happy mom. I'm very excited about that. So that's my little story on Twigs, and now I've got a couple little things that I want to say about this. Number one, if you are interested in an animal but there is some sort of crisis happening around you, some sort of natural disaster or anything that's going on, please don't let your selfishness and your excitement get in the way of any of that, because now looking back, I really wish that I would have just waited. Not that I regret having Twigs himself, because if I would have waited, he probably would have been sold to someone else, and then I could have had to get, you know, a whole different leopard gecko, and I don't know if that would have been the same kind of bond. So I do love my little Twigs. I do think that it worked out in the best way that it possibly could, but I do know that just the stress of everything that I put myself through, and the stress that I put Twigs through, and the company themselves through, is just not something I would ever want to do again in my life. So if there's something like that happening and I've gotten an animal that's, you know, supposed to be on its way to me, and there's something that's preventing it, I'm just not going that route anymore. I can't do it. It's not worth it. I mean, Twigs is worth it, okay? I'm glad that I really have him, but the stress that he was under being in the mail for 2 days, and that just being my fault because I didn't wait, that to me is not worth it. Number two, when it comes to your breeders, I would definitely recommend picking a breeder that doesn't have the amount of animals in their facility as the breeder that I picked, because you want to make sure that the animal that you do get has been really taken care of and really paid attention to, and you really need to go by certain growth standards. I know every single animal is going to be different. Every leopard gecko is going to be different. Every bearded dragon is going to be different. Even every cat is going to be different. They're all going to grow at different rates and in different ways, and it's not to a T or to a science what that number of weight or health or anything is going to be. You just need to have kind of a ballpark range, and Twigs was not even close to a ballpark range. So when it comes to your animals, regardless of where you get them from, even if you rescue one that is very underweight similar to Twigs, you just need to make sure that you do daily health checks on them. Look at their vitals, make sure they're okay and alert and not lethargic or anything. If they start to lose weight, make sure that you figure out why, or if there's anything that correlates to that, and get them to the vet if there's any issues. If they're not gaining weight, that's not really the biggest problem, as long as they're not losing weight. You know, animals can go off food for a long time. You know, Twigs even can probably go off food for weeks at a time, but as long as his weight is maintained, I'm not really going to be concerned about that. So we are still trying to get Twigs up to an acceptable health range, which he is now, but we want to make sure that we get him as healthy as he can possibly be to have a long, happy life with us, and I can't wait to see how that goes in the future. So anyways, that's going to be it for my video today, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button on your way out. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!